In this tutorial, we'll build an Angular app that uses Flickr API to search photos. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, but you can use any editor of your choice. In order to follow this tutorial, you'll need npm package manager, which you can get by installing Node.js. Go to flickr.com, sign up and create an account. Then go to the App Garden. This is the main source of information about Flickr API. Click on Create an App, then click on Request an API key. This app is going to be non-commercial. You have to fill in some information about the app and click Submit. And here's your own application key. We will use it in a few minutes. Let's install Angular by running this command. Now let's create a new Angular project by running ng-new command. We won't need Angular routing for this project. Go to the newly created project folder. Let's copy the API key that we obtained earlier and paste it inside the environment file. The next step is optional. I'm installing Bootstrap to simplify the application styling. After installing the package, you have to open Angular JSON file and add the full path of the Bootstrap CSS to the styles array. I'm going to run ngserve command to quickly check that the application is compiling and running. Open the browser on localhost at port 4200. It works. This is the default Angular welcome page. I'm erasing the whole HTML content of the page. We don't need it. Let's stop the server and create a new component by running ng-generate component command. It creates a new folder with the component files. If you open the TypeScript file, at the top you'll see a component directive with selector field. This is the new HTML tag that is going to invoke the new component on app component page. Quickly checking that it works. Now I'm creating a service that is going to connect to the Flickr API. Let's add a few imports. In order to use HTTP client, we have to import the corresponding module in the app module file. Let's get back to the app garden. The API that we're going to use is Photos Search. Here you can read about the arguments that you can pass to it, but right now I want to look at the response structure. See, I want to be able to parse the output, and for that purpose I'll create a couple of interfaces based on what I've just read in the documentation. Let's inject the HTTP client in the constructor. Now I'm creating a function that calls the API. I want to use REST format. Let's see what the documentation says about it. That's the URL that we'll use. I'm assigning it to the const variable. Another variable will contain the input parameters. Again, I'm checking the documentation. API key is taken from the environment file we updated earlier. Text parameter is the input keyword. A few more parameters to get a correct JSON output. Last one is the number of results per page. Let's use HTTP client to connect to the API and parse the response using map operator. I need photo URLs to be able to show photos on the page, but the API response doesn't have any URLs. We will need to construct URLs with the output tags using the specified template. Note that you can control the size of the image by adding a suffix. So here we go, the URL template with the parameters. I'm also adding a title field. That's all for the service. Back to the page component TypeScript file. I'm adding some internal fields, injecting the Flickr service we just created. The function search will be invoked from the HTML input tag. It will take the input keyword and invoke the Flickr service function with it. The only thing that's left is the HTML template. I'm using some Bootstrap classes to style it properly. The input tag is invoking the search function. The results are placed into a grid. The user will be able to click on the preview of the image to see the full image. This is achieved by using URL suffixes. Last thing, I'll put some styling on the image to size it properly. ngserve to run the application. The user types a keyword and instantly gets related photos. Now you notice that there are only 12 photos on the page because that's what we requested from the API. But of course, there could be more than 12 photos for the same keyword. It would be nice if we could load more photos when the user is scrolling down. And that's what we're gonna build next. While it's possible to do this from scratch, there's a much easier option using ngx-infinite-scroll. On the GitHub page, you can read the documentation and how to use it. This should be relatively simple. I'm going to install the package by running npm install command. Once again, the model has to be imported in the app module file. We will have to make some modifications to the component page. Let's add a new function that will call the Flickr service and concatenate the results. Now let's copy and paste the template div to the component HTML. Last, we need to update the Flickr service. The basic idea is when it gets the same keyword, it loads the next batch of photos. For that, we will use a page parameter. ngserve to compile and run it. Open the browser. Now when the user is scrolling, more photos are loaded on the page. I've added the link to the source code in the video description. Thank you for watching.